All right, Euro Sculpin. So you can see I've got my bead on here. It's not sitting correctly. I've got to start my thread to do that. So we'll hop right in here, start my thread, cut that off, turn my light up a little bit, move my thread forward. I'm going to push this bead with my fingers, and I'm just going to tie a little thread dam behind it just to help keep it in place. It's going to take, it's quite a few wraps to do so, but that's fine. Now that it's going to stay there, I'm going to move my thread back to where the bend starts for my tail, which I've got my marabou feather here that I have pulled the stem off. You can see that I've broken that tip off, or I've used it. I'm going to separate and just use these fibers here. That's all I want to use. I don't want any stem in there because that's going to keep it from moving. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure out about 2 shank lengths, shank and a half. Double check it, pinch it to the hook, capture it. Marabou is not the easiest to work with. I'm actually going to wet my fingers here, make it a little easier. There we go. So yeah, shank and a half, 2 shank length for a tail. Capture that with a couple loose turns, and then remember, I'm going to wind down the bend of the hook a little bit. That's just going to help us with our fouling of the tail. I'm going to come up and I'm going to wrap. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my feather back, I'm going to wrap up, and then I'm going to capture it up here with a couple turns, and then I'm going to cut it off. That's just going to allow me to have a cleaner body. Doesn't really matter, we're going to cover it with dubbing anyways. So there's my tail. I'm going to move my thread back to where the tail starts, and I'm going to take our ice dub in pheasant tail, and I'm going to apply this to our thread, again by pushing our finger into it and then acting like I'm rubbing glue off my hand in one direction. You only want to move in one direction. And once we get that on there, I'm just going to start wrapping kind of a chunky body. And when you run out, I prefer to add more instead of taking some off. So I'm going to add a little bit more dubbing here, like so. One more little pinch. Just want a nice, these fish are pretty bulky up front, and that's another reason we put a collar on this. But so now I'm going to take our rubber legs for some extra movement. And so I'm going to wrap those around my thread, and just by making a turn, I have now captured these legs. So I'm going to pull these legs over, do another turn, capture it on the far side, do a couple wraps just to secure everything. And now I'm going to wrap these just over my vise, just to keep them out of the way, because I don't want to trim them just yet. And we're going to do our collar, which Monday we did just dubbing. I've mixed dubbing and some clippings of our marabou feather just for some extra movement. But I'm going to align these fibers by pulling and transferring and just do that 5, 6, 7 times, it's going to align all these fibers going the same direction. So now I'm going to lay this over right behind the bead, big loose wrap, 2 loose wraps, pull tight, and then brush everything backwards. And it looks pretty crazy right now, but that's okay. So at this point we have our collar, rubber legs, body, and tail. I can now whip finish. Just a 3 turn, pull it tight. We can cut our thread. And now I'm going to take my bodkin, my needle, and I'm just going to kind of pick this out, and we're going to lose quite a bit of this, and that's by design. You always want to use just a little bit more than you think you need. If your vise rotates, utilize that so you can look at both sides of your fly. Adjust your legs if you have to. But I'm going to cut these now just shy of the entire length of the fly. And that's just going to add a little bit of movement as it swims through the water. But when this gets wet, it's going to have a bulkier profile up front, thinner in back. It looks pretty crazy now, but that is the Jig Sculpin.